Hi, everyone. Welcome to A2IM's Indiescussion series, where we select experts from our member community to talk with us about subjects that are heavily impacting the independent sector. For those who are joining us for the first time, my name is Alyssa Mark, and I'm the Director of Label Member Relations at the American Association of Independent Music. We represent independent labels, artists, and business owners of all sizes. This discussion series is just a taste of the programming that we've been working on for our virtual Transition of Indie Week this year. So if you've been enjoying these sessions, we would encourage you to look into attending our conference in June. We'll be presenting just about the same amount of panels and workshops that were originally planned for the in-person event, and tickets are steeply discounted to members of the organization. So if you're interested to learn more about the event, please visit a2imindyweek.org. You can purchase tickets there and also get a sneak peek at some of the programming we have planned. We'll be announcing the full schedule and speaker lineup on June 1st, so stay tuned. I'll post that in the chat room as well, so you can click on it in just a second. So today we're joined by a wonderful group of executives who are all quite experienced in successfully building a new business over the past few years. We'll be going over some best practices on how to sustain a new business in the COVID-19 crisis, ways to adjust your current business models, and elements that you should be paying attention to given the sudden shift in landscape. Tom Sarek, founder of Anti-Fragile Music and one of A2IM's advisory board members, will be moderating today's discussion. So Tom, I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce everyone and kick things off.
Hi everyone, my name is Tom Sarek. Thank you for joining us, as Alyssa said, for our panel today regarding growing a new business during COVID-19, which is a topic on, well, certainly on the minds of everyone on this conference panel and probably on the minds of a lot of you out there. A little bit about me before we do introductions for all of us on the panel. My name's Tom Sarek. I've been in the music business now for 25 or 27 years now, and I was, my background was really, I started off my career in A&R at major labels and independent labels, rising through the ranks, and I worked in A&R for about 10 years, and then for the following 15 years, I operated an artist management company and worked with a lot of different artists, big and small, for many years, and had a staff to help me with that. And then about 3 years ago, I launched a record label and publishing company, which is called Anti-Fragile, which I took the name from a wonderful book, which you should all check out, about building building systems that are designed to withstand and actually grow from turmoil type situations and difficult times. So it's pertinent to these times. But I operate an independent label and publishing company here in New York City, and I have a wonderful staff of 6 or 7 people here that help me in New York, and we've all been operating from home for these last 8 or 9 weeks now. Most of the people that work with me live in Brooklyn, and I live in Manhattan in New York City, and it's certainly been an interesting time living in New York City during this time and trying to, though not start a new business, really growing. We're still in our sort of development stages now, coming up on almost 3 years in existence, so it's still very much a new business feel and mentality, so there's a lot of challenges along with that. But let me before we get deeper into the discussion, let me introduce the rest of our panel. Madeline Nelson, tell us a little something.
Thank you. Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody. I am Madeline Nelson. I am founder and CEO of Heads Music, independent music company. There's an indie label division, a management company, a publishing company, and now distribution, digital distribution, which I'm insanely excited about. I never thought I'd get into that space. It needs real ownership, so it's very exciting to me.
Terrific, thank you. Jessica Sobrage, tell us a little something.
Sure, hey, so nice to see all of you virtually, I guess. I'm Jessica Sobrage, I'm the CEO of Cosign. Cosign is the fastest and most affordable way for creators to protect themselves. So we make it really easy for you guys to create common copyright contracts like split sheets, collaboration agreements, producer agreements, work for hire agreements, and then to register your copyrights with the Copyright Office, both as new registrations and just documenting transfers of catalogs you might have purchased or acquired more recently. Before that, I was at CSAC Rumblefish, former president of Women in Music, and currently here in Queens, not too far away from Elmhurst Hospital.
Oh,
Yeah.
the epicenter in the true sense.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. And hi, Glenn Barros.
Hi, I'm Glenn. I just founded a new business as of January 1st called Acceleration Music. I've spent my whole career in the music industry. In the last 25 at Concord. I started as the CEO of Concord in 1995 and had a pretty great run, very proud of what we accomplished and loved the company. But I realized that, as companies get bigger, your role changes a lot. And I saw a need in the marketplace that I thought I wanted to try and address, which is to bring investment capital into the indie market and hopefully make smart investments in indie labels, and at the same time provide a little help on the operational and strategic side in terms of how to optimize what each of those labels are doing. So that was the plan, and launched the business on January 1st with actually an acquisition of a label, Candid Records, which is a great little jazz label that dates back to 1960. Just in the process of kicking it off now in the midst of this whole pandemic, which of course that was not in the original business plan, but here we are dealing with it.
So Glenn, have you seen since the start of COVID, are there more opportunities? Has the feeling of what you do become more urgent, or how would you assess that?
I would say that yes, there is a greater urgency on in some ways. It's hard for me to gauge entirely because it was all, we were in the formative stages as all of this hit. So it's not as though what Acceleration's all about was very well known. But in my conversations with a number of, colleagues around the industry, there is an angst, of course, of what do we do. But I wouldn't say that it's panic, because I think labels by and large have fared, obviously much better. I think most of the concern goes toward the artist community.
But on the institutional end with financiers, is there more of a trepidation to get into this game because of the uncertainty facing the world and the industry right now?
It's actually going in two different directions. So for investors who have a lot of companies or a lot of investments in companies that are at risk, there's great concern. They're basically putting things on pause, trying to figure out what this all means, how much cash they may have to invest in their existing businesses to keep them alive. And on the other side, for investors who have capital and want to invest, I think music is almost more compelling because it's fared, at least music rights have fared far better than other industries. Obviously, there are industries that have been completely shut down. And, I think music being now predominantly streaming, it's a very attractive market. And it's very attractive for the reason that it's uncorrelated to the financial markets. So stocks and bonds can, move in either direction, and that doesn't really impact what's happening with music. So it's both. It's both a greater appeal, and it's also, a lot of worry, not related to music itself, but more related to just the general state of affairs in the investment world.
That's got to be challenging, navigating like two opposing trends at once in a way. But it's got to be very interesting right now. And certainly, like you said, with music, with streaming being pretty healthy, there's at least some real shade of positivity there in what you're doing. And that leads me to Madeline. Madeline, so tell me, with this, with Heads and the label publishing and distribution, since COVID has started, have you changed how you're spending your days? Is it more based around product creation and less about marketing implementation, or just generally, how has it changed sort of how you're doing your day-to-day business?
Madeline, you're on mute.
Madeline, we don't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
There we go. Oh man, I gave away all those nuggets and you couldn't hear me. Well, what I was saying is we quickly realized a couple of things. One, we needed to figure out how to make sure our artists find ways for them to continue to make money, because our touring is completely shut down. I mean, just slammed shut like within a day.
Touring artists.
Yeah. The other thing is, because they're not touring, because they're not out there on the road, like building audience, what are the things that we do to keep them relevant? What are the things that we do to keep their streaming numbers going up? And so content creation became a huge part of things, and then figuring out what everyone out there was doing. And we were hunting down
content creation, just curiously.
So content creation meaning what they're doing online, what they're doing on their social media, right? So for the average artist in my camp who maybe is posting like, something every few days, and that might not be them performing or having conversation with their audience, right? We now have been telling them, these are the things that you actually need to do. You need to keep your audience engaged. You need to keep them wanting to go to listen to your music. You need to maybe pivot the kind of content that you're making. And one of our artists, his name is Wyclef, took it really seriously and literally has created a piece of content every single day since we have been on quarantine. And we've watched his social media numbers shoot up, and we've watched his streaming numbers shoot up. All the catalog stuff, like every single day we get a notification that something from the catalog is playlisted. And then we see the numbers go up on all the newer stuff.
I also notice a lot more of Wyclef talking in the press lately. Maybe that's my imagination, but I read a lot. It seems like his voice is out there a lot these last couple months.
It is. And the reason is, one of the pieces of content he created, and it literally, he just was trying to express his feelings about what's happening. And so he recorded a song on his iPhone. And the song is called Distance. And one person got hold of it and invited him to talk about it on television, and then we got flooded with invitations for him to come and talk about it and just talk about being on quarantine and all that good stuff. So I mean, what you're seeing goes right back to us knowing that we needed to make sure our artists were doing things to try and maintain their relevance at this time.
I'll tell you, one of the things I've loved and enjoyed about this period, as many crappy things as there are about it, have been these Instagram battles at night. So the one with Jill and Erykah Badu, that wasn't really a battle. That was more like a love fest. But the one with Teddy Riley and Babyface was amazing.
Yeah.
Is Clef planning on any of those kind of things on Instagram Live?
Well, no. So he's not planning. He has already been asked to do a versus battle. He's not planning on doing it. What he has been doing is something I love. He's been doing these challenges on his Instagram. And there's one happening right now to 911, the 911 track. And folks can win money. And that also, I mean, when you get a chance, you got to look at the numbers. The numbers are phenomenal. Because what's happening is, every time a kid enters this challenge, they're telling everybody that follows them to go tag Wyclef. So, for the thousands of kids who might not know who Wyclef is, now they're going to like hunt down, who is this guy? So you're like seeing the following go up every day. But the most beautiful part of that is it's giving voice to young people, opening them up to his audience. His audience is now able to see them and comment on them and follow them. And I feel like that's been really beautiful, because, in a time when people could easily be feeling really hopeless, especially artists and musicians right now, it's a great platform to give to them.
That's terrific. Well, how big of a staff do you guys have?
We are 6 deep, so not very big.
We are all very sort of nimble companies, obviously.
We are, and we're all women.
There you go, exactly. I have all women working with me except for one. And so, Jessica, we were talking a little bit before we started the panel But I think the whole idea of what you're doing is brilliant, and I think that tell a little bit more about that, and then about as it relates to this period of COVID-19. Has this period made people feeling more aware and feeling more urgent to deal with this issue of registering copyrights correctly, less attuned to it, or is it pulling in two different directions, like Glenn had mentioned? But yeah.
Yeah, well, first, I mean, shout out to all the female-heavy companies we have up here, which is amazing. So our company is 80% female, 60% minority, and 20%.
How many staff are you?
Sorry?
How many staff are you?
We're about 10 and growing.
Great.
So, ironically, when COVID hit, we were in the middle of a raise. So for us, we took a pause. Thankfully, we've been operating for about a year, but it really—
talking to Jessica, you should.
Hi, Glenn. It's one of those moments where the world literally stops and you as a company have to adjust and figure out, okay, how much runway do I have? What do we do? What's the best worst case apocalyptic scenario? And go from there. And thankfully, we didn't have to lay off anybody, which was, something we're really, really proud of. And our team works really hard. So we wanted to make sure we supported them as much as we could. Yeah. So we came up with the idea for Co-Signed way back in the day. I've been in music licensing as both a clearance expert, a music supervisor, and every facet of the industry over the last 10 to 12 years. And almost on a daily basis, I would run into the issue of having a deal in front of me, not being able to execute it because we didn't know who owned the copyrights. So I ended up having over 200 conversations with different artists about, hey, like, how come we don't have this documented? I think at that time it was 2016. It's 2016. There has to be a better way to do this. And a majority of the artists said, we just can't afford to protect our copyrights. We can't afford the paperwork. We can't afford to register with the Copyright Office, but we'd like to. So Co-Sign became a really simple split sheet application at first to document who owns what percentage of every copyright, but it morphed in that we ended up adding on more complex copyright contracts. So now you can actually do split sheets, collaboration agreements, work for hire agreements, producer agreements, and you can register all of those copyrights with the Copyright Office. More recently, we added on the ability to do copyright recordations. So that's the process you go through whenever you've acquired a catalog. There's been some kind of change in ownership, and you have an actual document that you can use to
like changing the title, if you will, like on a house or a car or something.
Yep, exactly. And changes to actual existing registrations too. So we recently rolled that out because we realized a lot of folks that were home right now were home and thinking about their copyrights. Kind of similar to Glenn, I think we experienced being pulled in two different directions. I would say we're used in about 120 countries right now. And of the thousands of users—
getting busier because people are worried about their copyrights.
People are getting worried, but a good chunk of our user base still can't afford register with the Copyright Office. They're thinking about, where the hell is my stimulus check? Not can I find that copyright at the Copyright Office? So
in normal times, it seems like a lot of people neglect to do the copyright thing or do it correctly at least. And so in this sort of time, I can imagine it going both ways, where people really can't pay attention, but on the other hand, people who have things of value really want to make sure that their copyright is sorted.
Yeah, we've had an uptick on the number of cases that come across our desk of people who have been just researching their own copyrights and finding mistakes, or finding that their music is, placed somewhere they never gave permission for it to be placed, and they can't actually take legal action unless they've registered with the Copyright Office first.
Wow. And one thing you mentioned before the panel I also wanted to ask you about too, do you do specific deals when there's a rush job for someone who has a claim to pursue, for instance, and needs to get a copyright registered quickly? Is there like a FedEx?
The moral of the story is don't wait. Let's preface it with that. If you do have a legal emergency and you do have to file an infringement suit immediately, You can do a rush filing with the Copyright Office. It takes 5 days, but it also costs $800.
Wow.
So, and there's no guarantee that you'll even get the actual registration, because part of that is you have to list the reason why you're requesting this rush registration. So if you're putting down, I'm in pending litigation over ownership, I don't know that you're going to get your registration come through. It's far better to just take the time and register at least your top performing assets beforehand. It's almost like having an insurance policy on your music.
Very, very interesting. Very well put. I'd love to hear from any of you, of my great three panelists, about, without getting sort of too personal or as revealing as you're comfortable to be, sort of any adjustments or allowances with respect to our nation's stimulus bill and tax relief or benefits in terms of funding, PPP or whatever, that you all, as you have understood it and your want or need to sort of access it, how active you've been in that respect.
I can tell you that when we started seeing all this information about, small business loans becoming available and things like that, we looked into everything. We researched every bit of information we got. And what I ended up deciding was that I don't want to do a loan. I don't want to do a loan. I want to.
Pay back a loan.
Exactly. It's like, oh, wait a minute. These aren't grants, but most of them are not. You will eventually.
If you work on Wall Street, you could get a grant.
Right. Exactly. But so we decided not to go that route and to just tough it out and continue to, pivot where we need to, figure out all of the other ways that we had been making money, and then focus maybe a little harder on certain of those spaces for now. But it was great that all of those things became available. It just was my personal decision not to take advantage of any of it.
Excellent. Thank you, Madeline. Anyone else want to remark on this and the sort of stimulus and what's going on in our country as far as supporting small business, really, which is what the nation's, in a sort of roughshod way, I think, has tried to attempt to do.
I mean, I'll just say, just starting the business, it didn't make sense, for us to apply for anything.
How many staff do you have, Glenn?
We have none yet. We have a few partners in the works coming on board that'll be announced very soon. And then plans for a much bigger staff as we go. But there was obviously nothing for me to do directly on the stimulus side of things, but indirectly, it was essentially working with the trade associations to ensure that the right message was getting through to the government, and A2IM's been instrumental in that. In really getting the message out, and then once these programs are in place, making sure that everybody who could avail themselves of these programs knew about it. So I think our industry has done a pretty good job of making sure they're heard and in putting it into the right place. And then in just talking with other labels and artist managers and people I've known for years, a lot of them didn't know. They didn't know what they were entitled to, where the help really could come from. And so it was, spreading the word, making sure that they knew about the industry website you could go to get all that information. And I know in many cases it really helped, because the one thing I've seen, which is so consistent with the indie community, is, people were really, really worried about their artists.
Yeah.
How could an artist who lives off of making money on the road support themselves? And so getting that information out was a key.
Yeah, you're right. There have been a lot of, we're all very aware, and we all of us here know many people in the creative community, artists, agents, touring personnel, people whose jobs have their business, their ability to make money has disintegrated during this. And I totally agree with you, Glenn, that our industry has actually been really great at providing information I'll say our industry in general, and A2IM specifically for me personally, in terms of weeding through all of the sometimes contradictory information that's out there about what's available to small business. I mean, I have a multifaceted business, and mostly we're in the label and publishing business, and thankfully streaming has been pretty good. So we've been stable and all my staff is intact. But another part of my business where I've kind of segued out is an artist management company, and we still have a few artist management clients, a couple of which had tours, pretty big tours canceled. So I lost a lot of income for sort of April, May, June, and all the information sources out there really helped me in sort of applying for the PPP, which I haven't gotten anything yet, but applying for the PPP and just understanding what was available to shoulder those losses on the management side of my company, so that I wouldn't have to experience any lifestyle change for me or my team, which I desperately didn't want to do. But I do think that, and I've tried to communicate those things to our artists, sort of, and I know my staff's really good at this too, in communicating to our artists sort of information that's out there about funding sources. But I think if you're an artist or a creative person that works in this industry, pretty easy to find out what's available if you do your sort of research and due diligence. And I would agree with Glenn what you said about our industry on the whole being pretty vocal and pretty organized about getting the word out there that our industry is really suffering, and that creatives are really suffering. Another question to all of you operating these great small businesses, how has, I'll go to Madeline first. Say, Madeline, how has this crisis with COVID-19 impacted, how you're marketing the label and publishing company to other prospective artists? How has it changed how you're marketing your current artists to the public?
Okay, so prospective artists, I'll start there. Part of it is, like I said, these challenges that we've been doing. We're actually finding some amazing talent. And, once we have them in this challenge and we're communicating with them, we talk to them about how they're distributing their music, how they're making their music, do they have management? So that has been really good for us in the sense of also just keeping what we're doing visible to these new artists. And then with the artists that we already have, one of the biggest things I did as far as marketing and promoting is looked around at what everybody's doing. So MTV was kind of first to do something virtual. MTV started Unplugged at Home. So we had Wyclef was the inaugural artist for that. He did the very first one. And then I got involved. I looked at Triller. Triller was doing Triller Fest, and they would love to have Wyclef. And because of that, I was able to have all of my other artists on Triller Fest. We've done something with 300, where they have new artists emerging artists on their YouTube channel. So we just keep looking for those kinds of things. What are the things that we can plug our artists into that keep their visibility high?
That's great.
Yeah.
And Glenn, as far as your business is in terms of both sides of it, the financing side and the nascent label and music company side, how has this crisis changed how you're marketing and presenting what you do to both sides of those clients, given those opposing trends that you described a little earlier?
Yeah, well, on that investment side, this situation just permeates every conversation. It starts out with how are you doing, and addressing the situation of the world, and then gets to the business at hand, but ultimately comes back to and how's it going to change in the midst of this whole environment. And so it really does form the basis of every conversation. For me, really the only thing that has really changed in terms of the business plan per se is the timing. It delayed a few months, it pushed everything back. And then even with the first label that I bought, Candid, which had been dormant for a number of years, so it had no artists, which also made it easier for me in many ways because, you know, you asked about employees. I didn't have to bring on employees for that. I pretty much outsourced a lot of the functions for the start of this, so that I could focus on the main purpose of the business. But, you know, Candid is a label that has a great history in jazz, and, you know, my thoughts are to relaunch it. And, you know, that too was, I was thinking about a relaunch in the fall. You know, now it's going to be next year. Obviously need to assess what it means to relaunch a label in a world where you can't really do live events, and we don't know where we'll be, you know, in the fall and early next year. So it's on hold. I mean, it's really a delay. It's a wait and see how things develop, and, you know, we'll figure it out. But essentially, the core business plan has remained on track.
That's great. And Jessica, so we wanted to hear a little bit how you market and present what you guys do, and how that's changed in this atmosphere.
Yeah, so I think our first marketing newsletter that we sent out after the outbreak was sort of just a check-in. So we emailed all of our users and said, hey, how are you guys doing? You know, for us, being really sensitive to the situation was really important. A lot of people, as I'm sure all of us on, you know, this panel, didn't want to be bombarded with different offers and, you know, different promo materials. We were in a much different headspace.
Yeah.
So the first email was, okay, we're checking in. We're not going to push hardcore anything on you. We're here if you need help with your copyrights, registrations, protecting it while you're home.
You didn't send any panic emails. Panic.
There were no panic emails. There were no scary emails. No flashing red lights.
That would have worked though. That would have worked.
No, we used very calming greens and blues. That was the theme of our newsletter. But the second one after that was, hey, we're available if you want a step-by-step walkthrough on how to register your copyrights. So we use Zoom to do a lot more tutorials, to do more one-to-one interactions. And we set up these 15-minute back-to-back calls to really just help all of our users talk through any of their copyright issues.
Are these people, some of which are in different cities, obviously, that, because this is something I've seen with myself, like there's a lot of people that I would normally only talk to on the phone, but now since none of us can see each other, we're doing a lot more Google video chats and Zoom calls and all this. So you're actually like getting to know people in a way better who are far, not in the same city as you, because you're able to see their faces. And that, you know, phone has a certain kind of intimacy, and video phone is a very different kind of intimacy, but it's a nice thing in a way to kind of get to know someone via doing some kind of video Skype or Zoom call, you know?
Yeah, I will say I didn't do any face-to-face calls because I've been home drinking lattes and having latte foam all over my face. But we did a lot of sharing and walkthroughs and things like that. And I did learn how to become a barista during this time. It was essential.
We're all learning new skills, you know?
Yeah. So one of the other things we did was we actually reduced our pricing too. So before COVID, you could register a copyright using Cosigned for $35 on top of the actual federal filing fee. By comparison, the next popular thing is LegalZoom, and their fees are $114 federal filing fees. So in the face of COVID, we actually reduced that to $20. And we said we would do it, you know, for the course of March while we were waiting to see what was happening. And then it became, let's keep it going through the course of April, through May, and now through June. So as long—
Does that bite into your profit margins considerably though?
A little bit, but at this time we think it's worth it, especially for the group of our users who are home and want to protect themselves but necessarily can't afford to. And that was always going to be the premise of our company, is affordable protection for everybody across the board.
Interesting. That's great. That leads me to the whole talk about doing how you did video calls with some clients and we're kind of putting them at ease. I'm interested to know, in this time right now where none of us can actually be with each other, we can't have meetings with each other in person, and we all know that our industry is so heavily centered around in-person relationship building and networking. What are you guys thinking and seeing in your own experience as being the best authentic or actionable ways to connect with industry execs like you?
So for me, it's been 90% Zoom. I feel like Zoom is the main method of communication for us company-wide, and for me personally. Even, with our families, we're doing more Zoom graduations and Zoom parties and Zoom check-ins. So
You must have the Zoom Pro account.
I do. $15 a month. I got it.
Worth it, right? I'm thinking about investing in my company. We use the Google Chat video, which works fine also. And then, when I talk to people in Europe, they always want to do the WhatsApp video chat, So everyone, how are you doing with that, Madeline? Like, how are you using that a lot? And how would you, for someone that wants to connect with you, what would your advice be for how to be meeting people during this strange time?
First of all, I never knew there were so many of these. So there's Zoom, there's Google Meets, there's WebEx. Amazon has their own, Amazon Chime.
Amazon, I've never even heard of that one.
It's called Amazon Chime. I had to use it the other day for a call. I had no idea there were so many, but there are many, and I think at this point I have used them all. I find also, maybe it's old-fashioned, but I find myself emailing a whole lot more, partly just to do check-ins, especially like you said with other executives. I feel like this is a time where collaboration is as important as it's ever going to be. So, and that's a part of it is, trying to figure out like, how can we help each other? And especially like, how can we help each other help our artists? So for instance, the thing we did with 300, they're at Atlantic, they're at Warner. But this piece we did was with one of my artists, one of my indie artists. So, all of that is still across email and phone call. I am finding though that the video calls, it's weird. I feel like it almost gives people a kind of comfort. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you get to be with people. I know some folks are exhausted of it, but look, I got dressed up for you guys. I was so excited to get to be with people.
It's exhausting, but it gives a level of intimacy, right? Has it, just as a curiosity, Alyssa sent a good question about how deals may be changing. Has Zoom and this communication, or just during this period, has it changed the kind of deals you're offering new artists, or has it impacted at all?
For me, no, it hasn't changed. We've signed a couple of artists since this started. One young woman who's in Norway, and she is an incredible singer and songwriter. But yeah, so
Who's your distributor, by the way? Who's your distributor?
We are our distributor.
Oh, so you have direct.
Has Music is our distributor. We distribute our own music now, and we use a back engine, a company called Bequate.
Right.
They provide the back engine for what we do.
Right.
Yeah, and they're amazing. They really helped me to fly in that space, and
well, that's a lot more work for you guys, having to like pitch to Spotify and Apple and all that yourselves, right?
Yes, it is. But we had been doing it anyway from the management side, and so but yeah, it's a lot more work. And so the way we started really was by being super selective about who we're distributing. So we haven't tried to like branch out into getting big numbers yet. We are soon. Like we had a call today just to talk about what the revenue model is going to be down the line, because we're seeing this thing grow. And 2 of the records we recently distributed are both heavily playlisted on across all the platforms. So that's super exciting for us, because the distribution piece, like you said, it's tough. It's a lot more work.
Yeah.
I don't know that there are any women in it, which is what makes me so determined to be good at it. And there are a lot of offerings, but there's always room. There's always room.
And Glenn, another question for you along these lines is sort of how, because none of us are able to meet each other, that must make your job is essentially, as we talked about a little earlier, is somewhat of a matchmaker in a lot of ways. That must create really unique challenges apart from all of us on this panel, especially for you. how are you dealing with that? The sort of
It's hard. You know, I found that with relationships you already have, where you've already known people for a while, I think it's actually there's almost better interaction now. Times where you'd have an email or a phone call, now you are doing a video conference and at least connecting a little more personally that way.
Yeah.
But certainly new relationships are really, really hard. And, you know, I had a meeting a week ago on a potential investment opportunity, and it was one of these, you know, 3-hour meetings where you're talking about a lot, and it was great. We covered everything that we needed to cover, but I realized as the call ended that this is the time where we'd all go out to dinner, you know, and we'd all hang out for the next 3 hours and chat about anything else, right? And that's where you really get to know people, and that's not happening. So I haven't found a good way to replace that yet. And, you know, with family and friends, you know, we're doing cooking lessons in the kitchen together, and, you know, that's fun. Maybe that's an answer. I don't know, but
that's an excellent point, Glenn. And I feel the same. Like in the old days, pre-COVID, you know, you go to lunch with someone or dinner or breakfast with someone, business lunch, and you know, for at least a half hour out of the hour and a half lunch, it's a social thing where you're kind of getting to know them. Whereas in this Zoom world, there's not really the time for that, especially on our free Zoom account, which is limited to 40 minutes. So you don't really have the time to like really get to know someone in a casual way and just talk about life and that sort of thing. You kind of have to get down to business more. So you're totally right that you are. It is. This video conferencing thing is enabling us to meet people in a way more readily, but not as deeply, right? Because we don't have that, you know, okay, let's go out to dinner now, or, you know, that part of the lunch where it's just social and, you know, it doesn't have to be completely about what deal are we getting done today, possibly, you know. I wanted to kind of start to wrap up and ask each of you guys in general. Starting a new business, well, I think probably all of you have worked for big companies in the music space, yet all of you are doing either your own business or small companies in this space now, and that's completely in common with me. And I worked for big major labels for 10 or 11 years, and I've been an entrepreneur for the 16, 17 years since then. And it really agrees with me, and I didn't really know that it would until I did it. Is there any advice? I'd love to hear from each of you if there's any advice that you'd give to anyone in our music business space as to starting your own business, no matter what that is. Jessica.
I think this time in particular is definitely a self-lesson in tenacity and perseverance. I know that at the end of this, a lot of the investors who will be looking at investing in new startups will want to know, well, how did you do during COVID? How did you survive? How did you adapt? That's definitely the theme of what we're hearing as we re-engage a lot of our current investors and engage new investors as well too. So that really comes down to, I think, the adapting part. For us, before we did anything, we modeled out what our worst case scenario was, which was, okay, some money's coming through the door. What our moderate case scenario was, which was we're doing good. What was our best case scenario? So everything is hitting on all cylinders. And then what was our apocalyptic scenario, which is nothing is coming in the door. And looking at those 4 cases, you can kind of see where you land at the end of every month, how much runway you have, how much do you have to play with to adapt. And then for us, it was just kind of figuring out, once we knew what our bandwidth was to adapt, how do we do it smartly? And that equated to providing as much value as we possibly could virtually for all of our users, and also providing as much education as we possibly could, because in this time, we all know it, we're all soaking up all the webinars, all the blog posts, all the content like Madeline's creating. So it's really kind of figuring out how do we adapt for this new virtual world, so that at the end of it, when we come out, the investors can say, yep, they nailed it, they deserve a check.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica. There's a great sentence that I heard Rahm Emanuel, who was Barack Obama's chief of staff and subsequently the mayor of Chicago, who's a brilliant kind of pundit guy, said recently, never let a good crisis go to waste. Have any of you, and some people use that in their daily lives, like, you don't have to pay the rent anymore, you know, like that's an example of never let a good crisis go to waste. Have any of you seen opportunities, whether you've taken them or not, to take advantage of that in your current business in this atmosphere of COVID-19, Madeline?
You know, one of the things we wanted to know, and we just kind of like started asking really early on, was like what people at home want. And we started testing the waters by doing these acoustic sessions every day. And realized that naturally that's something that people are very like hungry for, like some kind of entertainment, something that's maybe a shift from the news, what's on television. So sort
of like something you wouldn't do if it wasn't COVID-19, sort of like these battles on Instagram, but
right.
Because there's COVID-19 and we have to do something, these are actually really great things.
Right.
Entertainment, really great pieces of entertainment.
Right. So we're constantly, and to go back to your question just about, you know, when you're starting a business, the first thought that came to mind was, you know, be passionate and have your platform and stand on your platform. And what this time frame has taught me is also be willing to pivot, be agile, because we seriously had to pivot. We literally had shows booked through June of next year. So you can imagine how much revenue that is for the artists.
You guys truly pivoted.
Or commissions, yeah. So one of the biggest pieces of advice I would give, whether you're in a crisis time like this or not, is to be ready to pivot, be agile, not only willing to pivot, but ready to pivot. So have done all kinds of research and legitimately understand your business.
That's excellent advice.
Thank
There
you.
is always a pivot. You just have to see what it is, right?
Yeah, there are always.
Glenn, any advice from you as to starting a new business, or?
Yeah, I would say I would build off of that. I would say you're absolutely right. You have to be ready to pivot, but just, you know, stay true to the purpose of the business, right? I mean, every business starts because you perceive there to be a need or a want that you can meet, and that doesn't change, right? The circumstances around it might change, but your North Star should be, why'd you do this in the first place? And
right.
Then how you achieve that goal it may be very different in a pandemic, a post-pandemic world. So that would be my advice. I mean, you know, it's interesting because you say we all work for large companies. When I started at Concord, it was a pretty small company.
That's true.
You know, over 25 years.
Built it into a large company.
It got big, and you know, for most of those years, our industry was in pretty bad shape. Now, the world wasn't necessarily.
Yeah.
You know, aspects of it were always troubled.
Really persevered through the decline of recorded music, right?
Exactly. And so it was a much different situation. I don't mean to compare the two things. This is obviously a world crisis, but nonetheless, there was some serious adversity and headwinds. And you had to say, well, who are we, and what do we do? What are we all about? What purpose do we fulfill? And how can we do it better? How can we find the advantage? How can we, you know, really meet the needs of our customers? And defining your customer is also something I would put out there. I think in the label world, it's a question of who is your customer. I think it starts, you know, with the artist, and artists want to be working with you and how you're going to serve their needs better than anybody else, because otherwise they have no business being with you.
Yeah.
And you know, so I think those are the questions you stay true to, and then how you answer them and what you do from that point forward is going to be individual. But to Madeline's point, pivot.
I agree with you, Glenn, 1,000,000%.
Yeah, and I think that's the ultimate thing I think to take away maybe from this, as far as starting a new business in this atmosphere or operating a new business in this atmosphere, is the ultimate pivot. You know, once we all got past the shock in March of this stuff happening to us, and the health issues that it presented to all of us and how to stay healthy during all this, the natural reaction for all of us was to feel, boy, our businesses are going to go down the drain. So what do you, after that moment, after you have sort of made peace with that there's a possible rocky period of danger out there, the ultimate pivot is to completely turn it around to not just are we not going to die, our businesses are not going to die during this period, but we're going to persevere. But not only are we going to persevere, but we're going to pivot such that we can make use of this crisis and perhaps do something that for the present as well as for the future might put us in a better position to have a healthy, strong business where we're really servicing our clients and our public in the best way possible.
Well, Tom, one thing I would add, I think the question of what can you do in this situation, and I know that a lot of labels are feeling pressure from artists too, who are in really bad shape. And I think one practical example is to say, well, maybe now that artists are off the road and you're not battling that misalignment of income coming from the touring business versus the record business and all of that, maybe the creation of more content gives more opportunity. Whether it's online content or whether it's even exploring D2C options. I mean, there's a lot of avid fans out there for each artist that want greater connectivity. Think about what are the things that you can create that will serve those fans, not taking advantage of them, but really serving those fans and honoring those relationships. And so there's one practical example, hopefully, that you can, it's the type of thing you can think about when the necessity is there.
Great. Thank you all so much. All three of you have been amazing. Wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Yes, here I am again. Guys, thank you so much for lending your expertise and your time to us just now. This was an incredibly informative session. Thank you so much. If anybody who is watching is not a member of A2IM and they'd like to learn a little bit more about what our organization does and you'd like to get involved, please feel free to reach out to membership@a2im.org and we'll be happy to fill you in on everything. Also note that we've been archiving all of our past Indiescussion series, so you can always log on to our YouTube at any time and watch anything that you missed. Guys, thanks again so much, and we will see you next week, next Thursday. Have a good one, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.